I cheated, and in doing so, I lost a man who meant everything to me. The trust between us? Gone, completely shattered. He walked away with his dignity intact, while I was left to face the wreckage. These days, he won't even let me get close enough to touch him. And honestly, I don't blame him. I know my situation is complicated, maybe even rare, but I'm desperate to hear if anyone else has ever been through something remotely similar. I won't pretend to be the victim here, because I'm not. It's not just me who's paying the price. My husband, our kids, even my parents are still carrying the weight of what I did. And believe me when I say, I'm truly sorry. So let me just lay it all out. About a year and a half ago, 19 months to be exact, I was caught having an affair with our married neighbor. He was a father of 3. I'm 32 now, my husband is 39. The man I had the affair with, we'll call him Steve to protect privacy, was 27 back then. Getting involved with Steve was the worst decision I've ever made, and it started just over 2 years ago. The affair went on for nearly 5 months before it was exposed, though Steve and I were only physically together 4 times. I know how it sounds. It probably seems like I'm trying to minimize what happened, but I swear, that's the truth. And yet, even as I say it, a part of me still can't believe I let it happen. I can already hear the questions forming in people's minds. Was our marriage falling apart? Had I fallen out of love with my husband? Was I miserable at home? The answer to all of that is an honest and resounding no. I was happy, completely content in my marriage. I love my husband. I love our 2 sons who are now 9 and 11. More than life itself, Jim, my husband, fulfilled me in every way, emotionally, mentally, physically. He was everything I ever hoped for in a partner. So why Steve? Why risk it all? The truth is, my attraction to him had less to do with who he was and more with something buried deep inside me. Something that pulled me back to my very first intense relationship when I was 18. That same kind of wild, uncontrollable magnetism that doesn't make sense but takes over anyway. Back in high school, I dated a few guys, 4 to be exact, but nothing serious ever came out of it. Just a few innocent kisses, and most of those boys felt more like childhood friends and romantic interests. But everything changed the day I met Charles. It was at a barbecue hosted by one of my friend's parents. Charles was her cousin, and the moment I laid eyes on him, something clicked. I was completely drawn in. He was 20, I was 18, and from that very first glance, it felt like we couldn't stop looking at each other. I still can't explain exactly what it was. It felt primal, magnetic, like something outside of my control. We hit it off at the barbecue, but he had to leave for work. Before he left, we swapped numbers. The next evening, we met again for ice cream and a long walk. We couldn't stop talking. Hours passed without us even noticing, and at some point, kissing just happened. It felt natural. He invited me back to his place, and that night became my first experience. There was something about Charles that stirred up this deep craving in me to give him every part of myself. Even now, I don't fully understand it. It wasn't logical, it just happened, but beyond the intense physical connection, we really had nothing in common. In fact, we were totally mismatched. The passion fizzled out after about 11 months, and I broke things off. A year later, I met Jim. He was everything Charles wasn't: stable, kind, dependable. He was exactly what I'd been looking for. Within a year, we got married. For 13 years, our life together was full of love and happiness. Until I destroyed it. We were blessed with 2 amazing boys, both of whom are practically clones of their father in both looks and personality. I'm sharing all this to help make sense of what led me to Steve. Steve and his wife, Marcia, were the newest couple to move into our neighborhood. They were also the youngest. My husband and I were the second youngest couple. Most of our neighbors were well into their 60s. Everyone welcomed Steve and Marcia with open arms. There was a community picnic not long after they moved in, and that's when Steve and I really noticed each other. Much like how it happened with Charles at that barbecue all those years ago. The next time I saw Steve was at his job. He worked in finance at a local car dealership. My husband and I were in the market for a new SUV, and when we learned Steve worked there, Jim struck up a conversation with him. We visited the dealership the following week. Steve made sure we got a great deal and helped set up solid financing. During the entire process, Steve and I exchanged subtle glances, but Jim didn't pick up on any of it. A few days later, I had to return the SUV to get some mud flaps installed. That's when things crossed a line. Steve greeted me in the customer lounge, then brought me into his office under the pretense of discussing more financing details. Once we were alone, he admitted he wanted to talk about something more personal, his feelings for me. I told him I felt something too, but we both knew it was wrong. He didn't care. He said he wanted me anyway. The very next morning, we acted on those feelings after the kids were dropped off at school and our spouses left for work. I went to Steve's house, and that's where it began. For context, my husband has a solid job, and Marcia works as a licensed practical nurse. Over the course of 5 months, Steve and I were only physical 4 times. It wasn't love. Not even close. I loved Jim. Steve loved Marcia. What we had was purely physical, and honestly, it didn't come anywhere close to the connection I had with my husband, but it was forbidden, and that made it feel exhilarating. Even if it was dangerously foolish, looking back, I think spending over a decade as a stay-at-home mom had left me craving attention, especially from someone younger, attractive, and new. Somewhere in my delusion, I convinced myself I could live this double life, have a secret fling while still being a devoted wife and mother. That fantasy came crashing down one Thursday morning, 19 months ago, when everything blew up. Steve and I were at his place, and we were in bed, completely exposed. When Marcia's mother walked in, she caught us red-handed and lost it. She started screaming every insult imaginable. She slapped and scratched Steve, leaving a deep gash down his arm. Then she turned on me, hit me square in the face, and yanked out 2 fistfuls of my hair before I could even grab my clothes and escape. I got home in a daze. I was bruised, shaken, humiliated, but more than that, I was crushed by the weight of what I'd done. That's when reality truly hit me. The moment it truly sank in that my so-called perfect marriage with Jim might be permanently damaged, maybe even over for good. I just froze. I sat in complete silence for hours, staring blankly at the walls, unable to move, trying to figure out how in the world I was going to tell my husband what had happened. Eventually, I gathered the courage to call him. I left a voicemail, my voice trembling, saying it was urgent, that there was something incredibly important we needed to talk about. But he didn't answer. He didn't even text back, so I followed up with a message, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he'd respond. Still nothing. And then, out of nowhere, I heard loud knocking at the door, followed by shouting. It was Marcia and her mother. They were standing out on the front porch, pounding on the door and even the bay window, screaming for me to come outside. Their voices were sharp and filled with rage. I was terrified, and more than that, I was humiliated. I didn't respond. I just stayed hidden inside the house, praying they'd leave soon. Thank God my boys were at school during all of this. I don't know how I would have handled it if they'd been home. Once they finally left, I collapsed on the couch, completely wrecked. I cried so hard, I eventually drifted off into a shallow, restless sleep. The sound of a car door slamming outside woke me. I glanced out the window and saw Jim's car in the driveway. In a panic, I rushed to the bathroom to clean myself up, hoping to look somewhat put together before he walked through the door. But when the door opened, he didn't step inside. Instead, I watched through the window as he turned and walked away, heading straight towards Steve and Marcia's house down the street. I stood there frozen, watching him disappear. He was gone for almost 3 hours before he came back. And when he finally walked through the door, I rushed toward him, trying to hug him, but he held me off. I immediately started apologizing, desperate to explain, to fix it somehow. But he shut me down cold. He said he didn't accept my apology and told me flat out that he wanted me to leave. I dropped to the floor, sobbing and pleading, telling him I didn't want to go, that we could work through this, but he wasn't having any of it. Then he called my mom. He told her everything I'd done and asked her to come get me. When she arrived, she apologized to Jim, talked gently to me, and finally convinced me to pack a bag and come home with her, at least for the night. As I stood there packing my things, tears streaming down my face, I asked Jim what he was going to tell our kids. He simply said, "I'll take care of it." And with that, I left, heartbroken, ashamed, and completely lost. That night, unable to sleep and unable to stop crying, I called Jim, and to my surprise, he actually answered. He just said, "Hello," and then went completely silent. I told him it was me and immediately began apologizing again. I promised him I'd never do anything like this again, that I'd spend the rest of my life trying to make things right. He didn't say a word, just silence on the other end. Eventually, he asked if I had anything else to say. I said no. Then I asked how he was feeling. He told me he knew exactly how he felt, and I just broke down crying again. He finally said I could stay at my parents' place for a couple of weeks and then maybe come home. I reluctantly agreed, but asked when I'd get to see him and the boys. He told me he didn't want to see me right now, but that we could talk briefly each night at 9. That first call ended with me whispering, "I love you," and him just hanging up without saying a word. The next night went the same way. I poured my heart out, apologized again and again, and he just listened in silence until I ran out of words. And then he said something that hit like a truck. He told me he wanted a divorce. The second I heard that, I broke down, begging him to reconsider, to give me just one more chance, but he refused. He even acknowledged he'd lose half of everything he'd worked so hard to build, but said it didn't matter. Then, with a coldness I'd never heard in his voice before, he told me he'd give me everything. Our house, the money, everything. If I just disappeared and left him and the boys alone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I cried harder than I ever had, telling him he didn't mean that, but he insisted he did. After we ended that call, I cried through the night, and somewhere between those tears and the sunrise, I came up with a plan. If I couldn't make him believe me with words, maybe I could with actions. I decided to offer him a post-nuptial agreement. One so heavily in his favor he wouldn't be able to turn it down. I didn't care what it cost me. I just wanted another chance to prove my love to him. While Jim was busy meeting with a divorce attorney, I met with one of my own, but not to prepare for a divorce. I was looking for someone who could help me draft a postnup. I ended up visiting 4 different attorneys before I finally found one willing to write what I had in mind. The agreement gave Jim almost everything. In exchange, all I asked was that he stay married to me for a set period, just long enough for me to show him I could be the wife he deserved. But Jim's lawyer worked quickly, and within 11 days the divorce papers were finalized. 2 days later, I was officially served, right there in my parents' house. Before I even opened the envelope, I had Jim serve with a postnup I'd created. That night, we spoke on the phone again after he read it. He seemed surprised, maybe even a little moved by what I had offered, and for the first time in weeks, I could hear something in his voice, a glimmer of the man I used to know. Not the cold, distant version who had haunted every conversation since the affair. The agreement was completely one-sided in Jim's favor. I won't go into all the details, but I can say this. It gave him control of nearly every marital asset if he stayed with me for just 30 more months. If I ever cheated again, I'd lose everything. No assets, no alimony, no child support, nothing. I also agreed to find full-time work within 6 months and contribute financially to our household. And maybe the hardest part, to write into the contract, I allowed that Jim could date other women if he chose to. I knew he'd never do that. It just wasn't who he was, but I wanted him to know I loved him enough to give him that option. To my shock, Jim accepted the agreement. He only asked for one additional clause, that there be no requirement for us to sleep together or engage in any form of physical intimacy for the rest of our marriage. That hurt, I won't lie. It crushed me, but I agreed. I told myself that if I just had time, I could win back his trust, his respect, and eventually his love. That was nearly 18 months ago. We've now lived under the same roof for 17 and a half months, and the reality is, we aren't really a couple. We're housemates raising children. Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful every single day for the second chance he gave me. I thank God for it constantly, but this isn't a marriage. It's more like we're 2 divorced people living in the same house, pretending nothing ever happened for the kids' sake. Since the affair, Jim hasn't shown me a single shred of affection, not a kiss, not a hug, nothing. He won't let me get close to him. On the rare occasion I manage to sneak in a hug or a peck on the cheek, I can feel how much he hates it, so I've mostly stopped trying. He also insists I submit to home STD tests every month, and he refuses to go out in public with me, not even at family gatherings. I want to make something clear. This isn't about control, but with everything we've been through, it's hard for me to believe she genuinely wants to try something like this. Let's be honest, open marriages are a gamble. More often than not, someone ends up hurt. I told her outright that I wasn't okay with it. It's not that I'm closed off to new experiences or against shaking things up in our relationship, but whatever we explore, I wanted to stay between us, just the 2 of us. The idea of bringing someone else and crosses the line I'm not willing to blur. She didn't take it well. She seemed disappointed, and I get it. I rarely say no to her. I love her deeply, and I usually bend, even when it costs me something. She didn't push the topic after that, but I could tell the silence between us had changed. There was a heaviness to it. I started questioning myself, wondering if I wasn't enough for her anymore, even in bed. I wanted to talk, to understand where this was coming from, but she kept her distance. Maya's a consultant, and her schedule is always packed. She often works across different time zones, and it completely messes with her work-life balance. My job keeps me busy too, but at least I operate within the same time zone. That alone makes things easier for me. Because of her schedule, I couldn't find the right moment to bring it up again, and I started blaming myself. Maybe I was too quick to shut it down. Maybe I should have asked more questions first. The guilt gnawed at me. Nearly 2 weeks later, I got home earlier than usual and decided to cook her favorite dinner. Something simple, comforting. I just wanted to create a warm moment. She appreciated it. We hugged, shared some time together, and for a while, it felt like things were back to normal. I figured it was a good time to finally talk. I brought up the open marriage idea again, not to stir anything, just to understand what she was feeling. But the moment I mentioned it, she got defensive, frustrated, said I was playing games with her. That stung. I wasn't trying to manipulate her. I just wanted to spend time with her, to hear her out and understand where she was coming from. Her reaction hit me hard, and I snapped a little. I asked her, straight up, if I wasn't enough for her anymore. That's when she finally opened up. She started talking about the interns at her office. They're young, fresh out of college, all in their early 20s. They're always partying, hooking up, chasing every thrill they can find. Their stories made her feel like she was missing out. That was hard to hear, but I understood. It's human to feel tempted when you're surrounded by people living a fast, wild life. I told her I got it. I really did. But I also told her I wasn't comfortable with an open marriage. I wasn't trying to control her. I just value what we have. Our relationship means everything to me. I've lived that wild lifestyle before. In my 20s, I did it all. The parties, the hookups, the thrill-seeking. But that life burned me out, left me feeling empty when I met Maya. Everything changed. She became my safe place, my future, the person I saw growing old with. I told her all of that. I poured my heart out, told her if she truly wanted to explore this, maybe we should rethink things together, but she said no, and she seemed to accept what I'd said. I really thought we were on the same page. Things felt normal again for a few days, but then something shifted. Her whole attitude changed. She started acting cold, brushing me off, saying she was overwhelmed with work, but it wasn't just stress. It was like she was shutting down. She started lashing out over small things, picking fights, mocking me for being outdated. I asked her what she meant by that. I stay pretty current. I know what's going on in music, fashion shows. I asked her if this was about the open marriage idea. She didn't say anything, just nodded. Since then, her schedule's gotten even more packed. Late nights turned into early mornings. What used to be an occasional long day became a regular thing. She started coming home at dawn. When I asked, she told me she was pushing hard for a promotion, trying to prove herself. I admire her drive. I always have, but something doesn't feel right still. I didn't want to think the worst. I tried to push the doubts aside. Then last night happened. I got off work early and decided to surprise her. I cooked her favorite, lasagna, and sent her a message. She texted back that she'd be late, probably past midnight. My excitement sank, but I waited. An hour passed. I distracted myself with a game, trying to hold off dinner so we could eat together, but something in me stirred. I got this sudden urge to pick her up from work. I'd never done that unless we had plans, but this time felt different. I thought maybe she'd appreciate the gesture. I drove to her office, a standalone building, easy to spot, and waited outside for nearly 45 minutes. It was almost 12:30 a.m., and still no sign of her. I started getting worried, so I went inside and asked at the front desk. The place was still active with the night shift. The receptionist told me Maya had already left. My heart sank. I felt foolish for even going. I got in the car and drove home, hoping I'd find her there, but the house was empty. And that's when the worry really hit. I wasn't even thinking about cheating, just that something might have happened to her. I didn't have anyone to call. She'd only been at this job for 6 months, and I'd never met any of her coworkers. I didn't even have a single contact number. I sat there, not knowing what to do. Eventually, anxiety turned into exhaustion, and I fell asleep on the couch. As soon as the first rays of sunlight slipped through the window, something pushed me to rush back to my room. I didn't even think about it. Just moved on instinct. When I got there, Maya was curled up peacefully under the covers like nothing had happened. I walked straight to her, gently pulled the blanket up around her shoulders, and slipped back to bed, my thoughts still heavy. Later that morning, she was already moving around, getting dressed for work. I asked her what time she'd made it home last night, and without missing a beat, she said around 3 in the morning, said she'd had a long day, something about a meeting with an Asian client that didn't sit right with me. So I asked when exactly she'd left the office. She casually replied it was around 2:30. That answer hit me hard. I wasn't expecting that. Right away, red flags went off in my head. Either the receptionist had fed me some bogus story about Maya not being there when I stopped by at midnight, or Maya had just flat out lied about being in the office that late. My head was still spinning from all the stress the night before, so I didn't push her for more, just try to keep it together. A few hours later, she called me. First thing out of her mouth was a question. Had I dropped by her office last night? Apparently, the receptionist told her I showed up, That surprised me too. I briefly wondered why the receptionist was even working that late, but I explained why I'd gone. Needed to see Maya, needed to make sure she was okay. There was this pause on the line before Maya responded. She finally told me she'd actually left the office in the afternoon for some meeting at a U.S. branch of her client's company, which was based in another part of the city. So that would explain why she wasn't in the building when I got there. Still, the whole thing fell off. I asked her to clarify, and she said the client was actually an Asian company that had a U.S. office here. She claimed she'd been doing Zoom calls late into the night with the team overseas, thanks to the time difference. I mean, yeah, global companies do this sort of thing all the time, but in that moment, even though her explanation technically made sense, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I didn't know if I should just wait and hope it all blew over or sit her down again and ask her straight out. I'd already had this same conversation too many times, and I was getting nowhere. If anyone reading this has any ideas or advice, I could really use it because things have taken a turn, and I just need to get this out. Over the past few weeks, I've tried everything I could think of to get into Maya's email or unlock her phone. Nothing worked. She guarded that thing like her life depended on it. I racked my brain for days, looking for ways to uncover whatever she was hiding, but came up empty every time, and while I struggled with the silence, she kept coming home later and later, night after night. The distance between us was getting colder by the day. We barely spoke, just the occasional word like two strangers under the same roof. Then 2 days ago, she was lying on the bed talking to her mom. Her mom's been battling kidney issues for a while now, and it sounded like her latest test results weren't great. Out of genuine concern, I picked up her phone to maybe check on any messages about her mom's condition. She kept talking about the hospital visits, the meds, the stress, just unloading everything. And then something hit me. As she kept chatting, I glanced down and noticed the screen was still unlocked, a couple of chat notifications popping up. Without making it obvious, I got up, still holding the phone, walked into the room, and kept the call going. I slipped into the bathroom, closed the door, and quietly locked it behind me. I put the phone on speaker to keep the call going, pretending I was still listening to her mom. Meanwhile, my eyes scanned the notifications, and there was a message about meeting someone later that day for a fun ride. My stomach dropped. I opened her social app and started going through the chats, and there it was, confirmation of what I'd feared. She was cheating, and not just with one person. She was tangled up with some of her younger coworkers, clearly enjoying the attention. A couple minutes in, she must have realized I had her phone because she started knocking on the bathroom door, calling my name, asking me to give it back. I didn't have enough time to read everything, so I jumped in her photo gallery, searching for anything concrete. What I found made my skin crawl. Dozens of explicit photos, my own wife in compromising poses, clearly taken during her affairs. It wasn't just one guy, there were multiple men. I felt like throwing up. I quickly emailed the images to myself, wiped the browser history, and shut it all down. All I could think was, this is real. She's been sleeping around with people she works with. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. Outside the door, she kept banging, her voice sounding more and more desperate. I couldn't stand hearing her anymore. I opened the door, shoved the phone in her hands without looking at her, and locked myself in again. I needed a second to breathe. At first, I wanted to blow up right then, confront her, scream, anything, but something held me back. I forced myself to breathe, to calm down, to wait. One of the notifications had included the address and time of her little fun ride for that day. Without saying a word, I walked out, grabbed the car keys, and left the house. She called after me, barely a whisper of my name, but I didn't even flinch. I just kept walking. I drove straight to the place. It was a hotel. I walked into the lobby and found the darkest corner I could sit in. I didn't want to see it. I just wanted to see how casually she'd show up to betray me. She was supposed to be there at 5. I got there by 3 and started downing drinks, one after another, trying to steady my nerves. I'd originally planned to wait and confront her at home, but by that point, I didn't even know what I was thinking anymore. I just needed to see it for myself. Maybe I was just too numb to face her, not even strong enough to linger in the lobby. By 6, she still hadn't shown up for a second. I wondered if she'd sensed I was there and changed the plan, but I was too far gone, drunk, emotionally drained, mentally hazy, to chase any rational thoughts. I stayed put and kept drinking. Around 7, I saw Maya, and in that instant, everything inside me shattered. My vision was foggy after 4 straight hours of whiskey. The rest of the night was more of a blur than a memory, running on autopilot. I somehow stood up, stumbled my way toward the reception desk where she was checking in, reached out, tapped her shoulder, and muttered something like, "Good luck with your fun ride." I might have said more, Probably slurred something bitter, but that's the cleaned up version. She tried grabbing my hand, tried to say something. I don't remember her words. What I do remember is yanking my arms away, shaking her off, and storming out of that hotel without looking back. I called a cab, had it drop me in my friend's place, and passed out right there on his doorstep. Next thing I knew, I was waking up on his couch the following afternoon. It was Sunday. Dylan made me some lunch and poured me a tall glass of fresh lemonade. I unloaded everything, spilled the whole ugly story. He told me to lock down the joint accounts, reset every password, and book a full STD panel immediately. But honestly, after being gutted like that, the money and privacy stuff felt like background noise. Still, I grabbed my dead phone, plugged it in, and waited while it booted. As soon as it came alive, the screen exploded with notifications. Hundreds of missed calls, dozens of voicemails, a flood of desperate texts. I didn't bother with any of them, and within minutes, the messages started up again. I blocked her everywhere. I couldn't even stomach reading her words. It made my skin crawl. That was yesterday. Today's Monday. I've called in sick for the week. I can't face anyone. Not yet. I've been drinking more than I should. Part of me wants to disappear. Dylan's been trying to track down the best lawyers around. Meanwhile, I've taken the steps, frozen accounts, updated passwords, and yes, did the full STD check. Luckily, the test came back clean. Dylan helped me connect with a good lawyer, and I handed over everything. Photos I'd pulled from Maya's phone. The whole digital trail. For now, I'm staying with Dylan, which works out since he'd been thinking about getting a roommate anyway. Even now, Maya still tries to reach out. She keeps saying we can fix this, start over. She even tried dragging Dylan into it, begging him to help repair our marriage. According to her, none of it meant anything, just a phase, some misguided attempt to feel attractive again. I don't know what to make of these Gen Z ideas about desirability or whatever she thinks justifies any of this. A few days after that, I sent Dylan to my place with the keys to grab my stuff. It was a regular weekday, so I figured she'd be at work, but she wasn't. She was home. She broke down when she saw him, begged him for help. Dylan thankfully told her I was staying at a hotel, not his place. Smart move. No drama on our doorstep. That's when Maya told him she quit her job. Apparently, it all started with a few interns at work flirting with her, made her feel wanted again. That attention led her down a path. Casual hookups, reckless behavior, even illegal stuff. At first, it was just a one-off, something she thought she could compartmentalize, but she got addicted to the thrill. These interns didn't have money, so she paid for everything. Eventually, she realized they were using her, but by then she was already too deep in it. When Dylan asked why she didn't just tell me the truth, she said she tried, claimed she brought up the idea of opening our marriage because she felt guilty, but I shut it down, and that somehow kept her from being honest. It doesn't make sense. Why ask for an open marriage after you've already cheated? Now she's stalling on the divorce, blaming me for pushing her into these flings, but she can't back any of that up. And to top it off, she's demanding alimony, saying the emotional strain of the divorce is destroying her. Meanwhile, I'm the one who got blindsided, betrayed, and humiliated. A few weeks later, Maya's sister Chloe reached out to me. She begged me to consider reconciliation, said Maya's spiraling. Severe depression, massive fallout at work. Those interns? They shared intimate pictures of her with other employees. It became office gossip. People started calling her names, mocking her behind her back. The photos eventually leaked to senior leadership. She became a joke, a warning story. She had no choice but to leave, and now, thanks to the rumors, she can't even get proper referrals. I told Chloe that Maya chose this. She walked away from a stable, loving marriage to chase some cheap thrill. Now she's living with the consequences. As for me, I'm moving on. I've cut down on drinking, started working out again, eating better, diving into my work. The divorce is still crawling along. She's making it difficult, but my lawyer says it'll be done soon. It'll be over eventually, and when it is, I'll finally be free of this weight.